Okay, so we've cleaned up our scene for the most part. There are other things we can do to further assist us with modeling, but we'll see those after we check out some of the topology tools. Okay, so we'll grab our mesh, and let's just rename this into 3D Catched Mesh. Oh no. Okay, so we named this guy, and we'll just hit H. Just check out our file. So we have 123D Catch Mesh, and it's underneath this null, which is pretty good. And in order to work with your retopology tools, you're going to need to have access to an editable poly mesh instead of an editable mesh. So here we'll just grab our modifier stack and just grab editable poly, or edit poly. And we have our edit poly. And the second we do that, we have access to our modeling ribbon. If you don't have access to this at all and you still have an edit poly mesh, you more than likely need to make it visible under the customize show UI, show ribbon. Just make sure that's on to have access to the ribbon. So now that we have access to our retopology tools, we're going to need a empty container mesh in order to store our topology. You can just make any mesh. The easiest way to do this is under poly draw and new object. So this makes a new object. You can see it's called box 001. We'll just call this retopo. Retopo mesh. Okay, so this object will be the container to hold our geo. So by default, this option will be set to grid, and we can go ahead and take a look at some of our tools. So I'm just going to go ahead and click on strips. You can see this grays out, and we can start drawing, and we're able to draw polygons, and right now they're snapped. If we rotate, you can see they're snapped to the grid. So that's something I'm not going to want. So I need to change this back to a usable option. In this case, we don't have access to it because we have our strips tool active, so we'll just turn this off, and we're going to just bring this to draw on surface, and then we get to pick which object we want. We'll click here and just pick the object that we want to draw on, and we'll just go back to our strips tool. Just zoom in. There we go. So now we have access to drawing our topology on our structure here, on our mesh, which is nice. One issue that you'll notice when drawing, we'll run into clipping issues, and that can be resolved easily with this offset function. These are scene units, and right now our scale is pretty large, so we can do something with the whole unit numbers. So something maybe like 3 might be good, and you get to see that our clipping has minimized, if not just resolved completely. So this is going to be a useful function now. If you're worried about whether or not your mesh is not on the surface, it's not really an issue because you have access to other tools like conform. So conform will, if we bring up our strength a bit, conform will, if you look carefully, you get to see that the mesh is now shrink wrapping to the surface. So now you get to see we have less of a gap, and it's just conforming to whichever value we put here. So let's say we put this to 20, it's going to pull the points 20 units out. 20 sounds like it's might be overkill, but you get to see it's not too bad here, because you're painting all the values, so it's not an absolute it shoots out to 20. And if we actually zoom in and look at what 20 units actually is, if we zoom in here, the squares get a little larger. Each one of these squares is actually 10 units, so 20 units would actually only be 2 of these guys here. So that's the main, these are one of the main tools. Your strips tool, you have access to a few others. Let's take a look at those. actually, before we do that, let's take a look at how to change the size of these polygons. Because right now, for retopo, for base retopo, this is a lot of geometry to work with, starting off. And really, the biggest thing that you're going to want to do, you're going to want to have the most control over what you're working with. And having this sort of fine detail so early on might be more of a hassle to work with. So what we're going to do, we're going to want to change the distance the way this works. So essentially there's a option here, min distance, and this is going to affect how our strips tool works. And min distance works off of pixel units. So what that means, if I go ahead and draw here, the distance between these polygons will be a lot larger than the distance of these polygons here. So I have a lot more geometry here because I zoomed in. And if I zoom out, my polygons will be still 10 pixels wide, but those 10 pixels in relationship to the mesh are cover more space on my geometry. So that's the first level of control that you have. You can zoom in or zoom in or out in order to change the resolution of the strips tool. In addition to that, we can change this number. So if we half this, maybe 5, or excuse me, we'll double this. So if we double this up to 20, it didn't look like it wanted to follow, so we'll just make it 20. So here you get to see at this particular level we have 20 units, and we can go to 40, and we have polygons that are twice as large. The setting is pretty straightforward. Just pick whichever ones you're most comfortable with. So 40 in this instance isn't too bad. And if I want to get more refined topology, we can just zoom in a little bit here, and then I'm able to get more fine detail. Okay, this is just one of the tools that we have access to. The next tool that we're going to check out, our topology tool. This is a useful function. It allows you to have more freedom with your topology. Maybe not freedom is the word to use, but it's much less stiff to use something like this. So in this case, I'm going to go ahead and draw where I possibly would want my topology to go. So we'll just create parallel loops for this, like so. Okay, then all I'm going to have to do here is just create where I want my polygons to go. And I kind of made a mistake there, but that's okay. So this is what we end up getting, and once we exit the tool, this is the topology that we have. Now, when working with retopology, it's important to kind of check out what topology you have. So if I hit F4 on my keyboard, you get to see that I'm able to show edge faces or wireframe on shaded. In some software is what it's called. And the issue that we're running into here is a couple issues. One, I'm able to select the mesh. I selected this other mesh. I probably didn't want to select it. So that's one thing that we're going to want to resolve. The other thing that we're going to want to fix is the fact that we're seeing the topology for this other object. So that's the next thing that we're going to want to fix. So let's fix this first one with the edge faces mode. Edge faces is this, and that's hitting F4. When you hit F4, you turn this option on. If we want to only view the topology for this current mesh, we can go to Configure here and just turn on Display Selected with Edge Faces. So then now, when we come into this mesh, we'll deselect you. Just turn you off here. There we go. So now we have an option where we can view the topology just on the object that we're working on, and we don't have to be hassled with viewing this topology, but we still have the ability to select the other mesh, which can be a pain. So we use the non-selected function of the non-selectability function of this object, which is called freeze. We'll just right-click Object Properties, and we can freeze this out. Now, just like hiding the object, this can be a pain to have the object frozen, because it's difficult to come back in and select the object. You're going to have to hit H and show frozen objects, and then now we have access to this, and then we can unfreeze it. So if we come here, Object Properties, Unfreeze. And another issue that we're running into with freeze is the fact that our texture's gone. When you freeze objects, it grays it out by default. And while we're in here, we can actually fix that. Show frozen in gray makes it so that we can see our texture at least. So we'll just make sure that we unfreeze it and uncheck show frozen in gray. So just like hiding objects, you have the most control with layers. So we'll just make a new layer for this. Here we'll just click there. So 1, 2, 3 reference, and we can freeze that. And we don't want this to be our default layer. If we make new objects, those objects will be frozen by default and cause some sort of confusion. So this will be our default layer. Now we've fixed a lot of the issues that we're going to run into, namely being seeing topology on only one object and accidentally selecting our reference mesh, which can be a pain. So let's take a look at some more of our tools. So we're on our surface. We checked out strips and topology. As far as being in this section, these are the two main ones that we're going to use. Now there are other tools available. You have a step build, and we'll go over these tools more in depth later. We can, if you have any questions, you can just hover here, and they kind of just talk about just about every option that you can do with this particular tool. There's a main function that you can use for each tool, and then there are support options. So with the step build, if you just click on your surface here, you get these points. And the main function here is going to be the shift key. So when you hold shift, you're able to draw clean polygons using quads. So it doesn't have to be these pre-made points. You can hold shift, and it's going to draw quadded polygons within that region. So if I, let's say, drew in a point here, I can draw a quad coming up to here and try to fashion that into a mesh somehow. So we'll have a quad there. So something like this is what you can use this for. You can feel free to use traditional tools as well. So you don't necessarily have to use all your retopology tools, and we'll get to that in just a second. So the shift tool is the main function of this, and it works with quads. So if I wanted to bring this strip down, I can just go ahead and just do something like this and just hold shift and just draw it out. You get to see how quickly that I can work with that. The extend function allows me to shift drag polygons. So this is just an extrude. So it's just a traditional extrude coming along here. So in this case I have, let's say, these 4 strips. And again, I was just holding down shift before, but if I hold down control shift here, you get to see I'm able to select this edge loop and just continue to extrude that out. So those are the main functions of the step build and extend. Again, we'll go more in depth with all of these tools in other videos. So there will be just a step build video and an extend video that you can check out. Now, as far as moving points, one of the easier ways to do this is just to drag. So we'll just go ahead and just drag these out. And if you have a keen eye, as I'm sure you do, you might have noticed that these guys aren't merged. So that's something that we're going to want to do, and we can access our merge if we just hit the 1 key. 1 will select vertex mode, 2 edge mode, so on. So I'll just hit 1 and I'll just select these points, and I'll just alt right mouse click, excuse me, we'll just right mouse click, and we'll just weld. Oh, I'll do target weld. My threshold isn't high enough. So we'll do target weld from here to here. Target weld. There we go. So I'm just clicking and just dragging, and that's going to give me my weld. In this case, I probably want something like this. Okay, so I use those weld options. We can also come over here if you don't want to use the right mouse function. You feel more comfortable using these tools. You can use these tools as well. And your weld, they'll be found here right now. I have target enabled. Now, if we wanted to fix something like this, where I'm not getting, essentially I need an edge loop down here, we can use our edge loop tools. So one thing we can do, I can just hit 2 on my keyboard, select this particular edge, select the edge ring, and then we can do a flow connect. And flow connect's nice. It rounds off the shape for us. So if we just did a regular connect, you get to see we still have this edge penetrating through the geometry, which we can fix with conform, but you know, we can just do a flow connect and it just tries to round it off for us. So now here, if we went back to our freeform tools, we can grab our step build here, and I can hold in order to delete the points. I think it's just Alt. So we'll just grab our step build, just Alt, delete those points, and then I'll just hold Shift. Let's see if we can get this in here. Shift grab to put this guy in, and then another Shift. Then now we have that topology in place. So you have access to a lot of tools actually. One of the final things that I'm going to I want you guys to be aware of is the fact that on top of all of this, we can apply a symmetry modifier in order to speed things up. Now, I understand my face isn't symmetrical, and I mentioned that earlier, but with this, you can effectively just ignore half the face, just get what you can to be symmetrical, just line it up, and just work with it that way, or just use this as a base for your topology. So instead of doing your editable poly stuff just down here, we grab our symmetry mesh and we apply another edit poly on top of this symmetry. And with this, we can grab our conform. You're going to see that the mesh eventually is going to be conforming to our object. There we go. So here you get to see I'm still maintaining full asymmetry on my face, but I'm just using the topology. I'm just using this mesh in order to get the topology kind of roughed out. So this is a quick way in order to just kind of work on one half, mirror that topology over, and then just conform it down after we're done, but still maintain asymmetrical shapes as far as asymmetrical form. Really gotta dig that. So if just checking with this modifier in place, we can just jump down to our edit poly. I'll say yes here, and I want to visualize, I want to see what this top mesh looks like. So we'll just go ahead and show end result here. So now when I do things to this editable poly, this history passes on to symmetry passes on to this edit poly. So now if I came into here and did let's say a extend, and then I'll just hold shift extrude, and you get to see we're getting that shift extrude here. It's not going to match the shape, but that's okay. We can go ahead and fix that later. We'll just go down here. grab my drag. Let's drag this out. And if we look at the opposite side, you get to see we're getting that same thing. Now, to fix that up, we'll just come here, we'll straighten this out. We can do conform relax, which is this guy. That didn't help us out too much. Clean some of this out. Just do a conform. There we are. So you can see how these tools kind of stack up upon each other, and some methodologies you can use in order to create the most optimal topology for your case. Now, when you're working with your topology, it's important to just make sure you read your mesh. I'm looking at this, and then I'm getting some hints that I probably want some poly loops down here. So I'm just looking at that. I can probably grab my topology tool. Yes, I understand. So I'm going to kind of follow this out here. Just kind of get that, and I'm going to want to get these loops in place. Oh, I didn't get that one in. There we go. Come on. Kind of missed one up, but that's okay. So I'm just getting my base topology here. So when I exit this tool, let's say I go to my step build, hold shift, and I can bring that in, and we'll conform this out. I'll hit F3 to kind of see what it is that I did wrong here. Come on. Oh, maybe this. Is this side working? Let's check you out. Conform. Okay, that side's working. There we go. Okay, so you got to see how you got to use all the tools in your arsenal in order to create decent geo. So I'll go ahead and in another session we'll just go and just make topology. I'll be quiet for the most part during that session, and you'll just get to see how to get an end result.